And thanks to Mitch and Eric for organizing. Thanks for everybody for coming and listening. So I'm going to be giving an example of addressing a pretty substantive question with some applied measurement methods that really build and borrow from what Andrea Hassan had spoken about this morning in a very, very scary sort of fashion. Um, so to motivate this, a bunch of years back for this paper, we had examined the associations between parent and grandparental psychopathology on a third generation experience of behavior problems. And in the study findings found some evidence for moderation, such that kids with both parental and grandparental history of psychopathology or depression had higher levels of internalizing problems. The study, though, comes with the limitation that kids' behavior problems were assessed via parent report methods, and it's possible that results are influenced by reporting biases in the parents about their kids based on mood state effects. How many of us in the room have had the same or similar sentence in the discussion section of your papers? So it's a weighty threat to validity of a lot of literature. So we need to be able to test and decipher and discriminate between true effects versus measurement artifact that might be confounding our results. So this ends up becoming an issue of measurement bias. When in the context of studying this question in between diagnostic groups or sex or gender-based groups, we can turn to techniques like measurement invariance that rely on multiple group analysis. Up until about 2 or 3 years ago, because of Andrea, Dan, and Patrick, we didn't have methods of being able to test for method bias with continuous variables. So we are now in a new frontier being able to test these questions because of those statistical advances. So when we're talking about bias, we're interested in whether or not there's equivalence of a construct or a factor that's based on some background characteristic. So for these types of studies that we're relying on parent reports, in particular, we're interested in whether or not our parent reports of kid behavior are influenced based on their experience of psychopathology or personality or whatnot. So in trying to address this question, it becomes a challenge because it's a modeling issue and we need to have fairly large and robust samples. So fortunately, the large consortia of institutions have funded the ABCD project. And in this data set, it's a large sample. In here, we have about over 8,000 reports of mother reports on their child. And mothers also reported on their own experience of internalizing problems and detachment. So the reports were made on the standard CBCL and the ASR, the Adult Self-Report for Maternal Reports. But the factor structure has been fairly controversial between what was identified a priori and published. And in a reanalysis by Giorgia Michelini, now at UCLA, she has identified these 5 different dimensions that are very robust and fit the data extraordinarily well, with internalizing problems that includes combinations of fear and some withdrawal items, detachment that is very much an asociality type of factor, somatization, just as it is with physical symptoms, externalizing problems about rule breaking and antisocial behavior, and neurodevelopmental problems that gets more into attentional issues and things that might be more autism spectrum. Maternal provider reports on the ASR again, and the same types of constructs materialized with internalizing problems and detachment. So again, about 8,000 mother-child reports. And we used the moderated nonlinear factor analysis in order to test measurement invariance across within a single study. So here we're focusing on those measurement parameters, those parameters about whether or not controlling for the association between the maternal factors and the latent factor, whether or not there's still prediction and bias reported in the level of internalizing, of behavior problems in the kiddos, or the way that the indicators are related to the underlying factor. So how did these results turn out? So after estimating a bunch of different models, So the results here are presented in, so examining separately the effect of maternal detachment and the effect of maternal internalizing problems on each of the different summary scores of bias. So estimating the model in a lot of different ways, presenting the average bias for the child internalizing score for all of the different kid psychopathology scores. These are presented in correlation metrics, all of them. So these would be interpreted as simple Pearson R's. So we're having trivially small impact of maternal bias in the report of kid behavior problems based on mom detachment and internalizing problems. So what does this actually mean? So we have minimal evidence for maternal mood state bias influencing maternal reports of youth problem behaviors. And as somebody who has treated OCD for a lot of years, providing reassurance is something I really don't do very much. But in this context, we're finding empirical support for the fact that the effects that we're finding for maternal reports of kid behavior aren't being impacted so much by mood state bias as they are reflecting true differences in those manifestations. And there it brings to a close. So I really am appreciative to Giorgia Michelini for providing the summary of her models. Those are published in Translational Psychiatry now. And my student Rebecca Mennes for being brave in identifying how to access and play with the ABCD data, because that was a bear. Thank you.